Hello and welcome to another Wolftime gaming video. Today I'm going to be painting Jyn Erso from Star Wars Legion, a game by Fantasy Flight Games. The mini's wearing what Jyn wore on Scarif, so I'm going with that sort of a theme, just to match the other troops as well. So one of my favourite films was Rogue One, and I've really been looking forward to getting hold of this one. Before we get started though, as usual, let's get that kettle on. So let's get started. So the first thing to do, once you've obviously built and based the model, in this instance I'm not actually putting any basing material on just yet, but is to spray the actual model itself. And I use Wraith, which is a spray by Games Workshop, so you can use the contrast paints and things, which is what I'm going to base most of this model on. So the first stage was eyes. I wanted to get the skin and the eyes out of the way first. So I used Corvus black just to essentially draw from the nose outwards a black line where the actual eye is. You really need to take your time with this one here. You can mess up quite a lot, but if you do, then you can just touch up with a bit of Wraithbone paint or white paint afterwards. So the next stage is the actual eyeballs themselves, and I've done that in exactly the same way. I'm using the Army Painter Insane Detail brush just because it's really small, and just use white scar as the paint, and all I'm doing is drawing from the essentially the bridge of the nose outwards in a line, so that would be the eyeball. The final stage of the eye is the actual irises, which I've just gone back to the Corvus black, and I'm just essentially drawing from the top to bottom of the eye, and just to make a ball, a black ball essentially. At this sort of size you don't need to make any more effort with it. You don't need to put colour in or anything like that. I mean, some people do, but I mean that's an insane level of detail just for models that you want to get on the table really. And then it's on to the actual skin, and I've used the contrast paint Gulliman flesh to do this, and I've just taken my time. Around the gloves you've got fingerless gloves that she's wearing, and there's a hole at the back of the hand and just around the wrists, so you just drop that straight on there, and also around the face obviously. I've used the Gulliman flesh as well. Just really take your time with this one. You don't want to get it over the eyes, because if you do get it over the eyes, if you're using this, then obviously that detail that you've put in, the white, will just disappear and go flesh coloured, and you'd essentially have to start again. But by using the contrast paint, it gets rid of the need to use multiple flesh tones to be able to achieve something that looks really good when you're on the table. And then it's onto the actual uniform itself. Now, as I said, I wanted to go with sort of a Scarif theme, but I'm pretty sure she was wearing this on Jeddah as well, which you can see in the photo there. And one of the main colours you can see is black. So this black trousers, it's got like a light grey shirt on as well, which I'll use the same colour with. It's both black Templar contrast paint again. I just put a little bit heavier on the trousers than the shirt, and that way the shirt stays a lot lighter. I did notice that where it pulled away really well from the trousers, but that obviously meant I'd need to go over them again. I also did the weapons at this point as well, the baton and the pistol. Essentially it saved doing it at a later stage. I put a couple of coats on the baton as well, just so it stayed quite nice and dark. The next colour we moved on to was the contrast Skeleton Horde, and I've used that down the sleeves of the jacket. And if you look at just the image on the screen there, you can see she's wearing a green sort of coloured jacket with a tan stripe essentially down the sleeves. Now the contrast Skeleton Horde I thought was ideal for this. However, when I put it on, it still remained quite light, so I actually put a couple of coats of this just so it darkened it down quite nicely. I then moved on to the browns, which I used contrast Wyldwood for, which is essentially all the all the areas that we haven't done other than the jacket. So you've got the boots, you've got the belt around her waist with the holster on, bits around the knees. You've also got like the gilet that she's wearing, what looks almost like form of body armor, but it's not. It's like a body warmer style jacket with lots of pockets and things on, very sort of military-esque styling. And also the gloves as well. She's wearing like dark brown leather gloves. I did a couple of coats in a few areas just so it darkened it down a little, but you can see already it negates the need for multiple colours. At this point I also did the hair, and I used the same contrast Wyldwood for the hair as well. However, I did about 4 coats on this one, only light coats. I didn't go mad with it because her hair's a very, very dark brown. I could have gone with a brown paint rather than the Wyldwood, but it wouldn't have had the same effect. It was then onto the actual jacket itself, and to start with I used Caliban Green for this one. It's quite a dark green. It's the darkest green I've actually got on my desk, so I had no choice really to go with this one. But as I was doing it, I thought it was a little bit too light, so I did need to darken it down afterwards. But I also will note that I had to do 2 coats on this one, because you can see a lot of that base coat, the Wraithbone base coat, is actually coming through quite a lot on this, especially around her scarf that's blowing in the wind. So yeah, a couple of coats on this one. Just took my time around it really, because obviously we've already done down the sleeves and things, and I didn't want to lose that detail that we'd already put on there. We'll just give it a 20 minute, half an hour to dry on the first coat, and apply a second coat, and it gives you that nice coating then of a dark green. It is a big block of colour, so obviously we have to have the shading in separately. Before we got onto the shading now, I did just want to add a little bit of silver around the weapon and the baton, so I used Leadbelcher and just dry brushed a little bit just on the edges of the baton, and just to pick out some of the raised areas along the actual baton itself, and along the pistol as well. And a lot of the weapons in Star Wars are very, very dark, but they all do have like a silver highlight almost around the edges. I then, while I was waiting for the green to dry, I actually did the base as well, and I used Corvus black just around the base. Did take a couple of coats, because again it's very, very thin paint. You can see the base coat straight through, so it does definitely need a couple of coats. I then moved on to the shading, which was with Nuln Oil, and I really did concentrate just purely around the jacket, so all the green areas, and also down the sleeves, those stripes as well, because it darkened it down really nicely and gave it the effect that you can see in the film. I avoided the rest of the areas because the shading already exists essentially by using the contrast paint, and to put this on would make it even darker, and I didn't want to lose that detail that you get from using the contrast paints. The final stage then was actually basing. The reason I left this till the end was because I wanted to just use a really fine sand, because I wanted it to be Scarif themed. I didn't want to do any painting of the actual base itself. I wanted to avoid that completely, like I've done with previous videos where I've painted the actual sand that I put on the base of the grip. In this instance I wanted to use purely the sand. So you see I just covered it in PVA. Dropped it in a little tub of sand there, just wiped off the excess just around the edges, and left that to dry for a little while. Because it's very plain, I wanted to add a little bit of foliage in there, so I just added a couple of grass tufts. You can pick these up from anywhere, there's so many out there. I can't even remember the colour of these, but they're just like a summery grass, so they're not too dark, because it'd imply there's a lot of moisture in the soil, which in this instance it wouldn't be. Not that it really matters so much on the tabletop, of course. So that had almost like it's not dead grass, but you've got like some browns and tans in there as well, so it looked a little bit more realistic. But that's the model finished, and I think she looks absolutely amazing. I'm really pleased with how the green turned out, even though I was quite worried when I first put that Caliban Green down. The contrast paints have done amazingly around the belt. The browns really do look good, and that was just like a single coat almost. A couple of coats on the actual body warmer area, but the belts was just a single coat, and they looked absolutely fantastic. I think she's looking really good, and I really can't wait to get her on the tabletop. I will note that you do need to put a few more coats on the hair. It was a little bit too bright. But thanks for watching, guys. I really hope you enjoyed the video as much as I enjoyed actually painting Jyn herself. Make sure you hit that subscribe button to see any future ones, and I'll see you in the next one.